All right, let's see here. What do we have going on? Everyone else is in the other room, reading some book about a vampire, so I suppose I'll read my own book. Not all that interested in cautionary tales, anyway. Let's see, we have Tom Danger and the Ice Snake. This book is dedicated to my wife and children, without whom the book would not be possible. I love you guys. Well, I think that's a great dedication. Let's see here. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Tom Danger went walking through the snow. I'm sorry? What was that you said? Well, why, you've never heard of Tom Danger? Not a single one of you. Now I find that hard to believe. Every child knows about Tom Danger. You're children, aren't you? Or at least childish? Well, if you are neither childish nor a child, let me assure you, you've heard of him before. He's the greatest man who ever lived. Well, not really. If I'm being honest, that's not true at all. That privilege already belongs to another. However, that doesn't change the fact that Mr. Danger is a man absolutely worth knowing, and a man I'm certain you already know, or at least knew about at one time. But since you insist on claiming to know nothing of him, I will right now either indulge your attempt to fool me, or refresh your memory, and I tell you a little bit about him. Above the world, on that great mountain known as Imagon, or perhaps Imagine, we'll use that, I like it better, where the snow is eternal and the wonders inescapable, and the beauty ever-present as the danger, in a modest yet handsome cabin lives a remarkable man, an adventurer extraordinaire, trained pilot, part-time poet, and full-time mustache technician, wrestler, marksman, chef, literary critic, and lover of all things winter. Lover of all things winter? My goodness, what kind of man is this? A man who is both ornery and kind, gentle and yet strong, uncompromisingly honest, but equally gracious. He is wise as he is childish, and by childish I mean that he's never lost his sense of wonder, nor his love of play. He is childish in the way every adult should strive to be. Indeed, he is mature enough to be saddened by the immaturity of such grown-ups who believe childish lies when one reaches maturity. Here's Tom Danger! And all his stories begin like this. Yes, back to this. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Tom Danger went walking through the snow on what was certainly a most beautiful morning. Now, as you know, Tom Danger begins each day consuming the finest breakfast foods the world has to offer. So, at his table, prior to his walk, Tom enjoyed 12 pancakes, 5 waffles, 30 strips of bacon, a pound of sausage, toasted baguettes with blueberry jam, some boiled fish, a bowl of miso soup, 3 plates of nasi lemak, silog, a bit of halwa puri, 5 plates of chiquilis? I have no idea how to pronounce half of these things, but I'm sure they're delicious. White and black pudding, baked beans, 1 plate of akara with a bowl of pap, and finally, because no breakfast is complete without it, a mixing bowl full of cereal and 2 gallons of milk to wash it all down. Of course, this was not nearly enough to satisfy Tom's hunger, which is why he decided to go for a walk in the first place. He figured he could finish filling his belly with a couple dozen apples from the silver tree by Lake Undra, only a few miles from his home. As I'm sure you're aware, silver trees, the rarest of all trees, grow in the most wonderful apples, known simply as snow apples. Each one is perfectly round and as large as an ostrich's head. They are white as snow, with golden rings that wrap around their skin from top to bottom. They smell like sour candies and taste like lemon taffy covered in sugar. They are delicious, and Tom Danger cannot get enough of them. So you'll understand why it was that after Tom had arrived at the silver tree, he had already eaten 8 snow apples before noticing that there had been something special nearby the entire time he had been there. To be fair, though, if I had a snow apple before me at this very moment, I doubt highly if I'd notice anything else either. In fact, the only reason Tom eventually did was because he had dropped one of the snow apples from his hand. The apple fell to the ground and rolled toward Lake Undra, and only stopped rolling after bumping into what appeared to be a miniature glacier. A glacier that was nestled into the ground directly between where the shore of the lake finished and the water started. It was a beautiful, diamond-like creation, which, if looked through, would give one a kaleidoscopic vision of their surroundings. That is, of course, if it were empty, but empty it was not, for inside the glacier's invisible walls, writhing back and forth in its crystalline home, was a creature with 2 black eyes that looked like living water. Wow, that sounds very interesting. Living water. Now, if you're older than 5 and younger than 20, you are old enough to know and young enough to recall what type of creature it is I'm talking about. Indeed, I am certain that you already know that the so-called glacier was really no glacier at all, but an egg, and that the creature inside the egg was a baby ice snake. But for those readers too young to have learned, or so old they have forgotten, or perhaps not quite old enough to have remembered again, I will devote a small amount of space here for explanation. Ice snakes, or as scientists prefer to call them, icy snakus, are a rare breed of snake that live primarily on Imagine Mountain. You see that lady? She's a scientist. Of all snakes, they are the most gentle, kind, and cleanly. They do not hiss, instead they make whoosh. Their fangs are rounded and devoid of venom because icy snakus, unlike other snakes, is an herbivore. That is, they only eat plants. As an aside, they also eat dirt. How odd. They are master swimmers who tend to travel through rather than on top of snow. This is a cautionary measure taken to protect themselves from predators. They do not always travel this way, as they sometimes prefer traveling on the top layer of the snow. However, should you ever find yourself on Imagine Mountain, do be careful where you step. Ice snakes can grow up to 18 feet long and 7.5 inches in diameter. They can lay only 1 egg a year, and each egg tends to be the size of a regulation football. Each egg is laid on the bank of a river or lake, in a neatly dug hole where the water and the edge of the shore meet. Typically, when the baby is ready to hatch, the surrounding water will have eroded the land around the egg, and the baby will hatch from the bottom of the egg into the water. Should the land around the egg be removed prematurely, the egg, being incredibly buoyant, will float until the baby hatches from its bottom. Either way, once the baby is born, the egg dissolves in the water. A newborn baby ice snake is usually about 2 feet long. Whoosh! As indicated earlier, in the eggs, ice snakes resemble clear water. That is, if clear water were wrapped in cellophane and molded into an oblong formation, were sentient and had 2 black eyes. Once they have hatched, however, and after having swum in half an hour or so, ice snakes travel onto land and into the snow, where their skin turns a blinding white, a white they will remain till the end of their days. The ice snake's mother and father are present when the egg is laid. Then the father gives a very special whoosh, which is a sound the father will speak to the baby only twice in its lifetime. After the first whoosh, the parents depart for their home. They do not return until the egg hatches 7 weeks later. On that day, the father and mother will meet the baby in or around the same location they had left the egg, and the father will call to the newborn with a whoosh. Identical to the first one, he had the day the egg was laid. Some of this is a bit of a tongue twister. The baby will instinctively recognize its parents and go to them, at which point they will all leave for home together. Now that we are familiar with ice snakes, or as Tom likes to call them, nice snakes, I can tell you what happened after Tom noticed the egg. He picked up his apple, took a seat in the snow, and sat there admiring the egg for several minutes. Tom, who was always amazed by nature, trees, snow, animals, everything outside his front door, always confirmed in his mind that there was no greater artist than God. The egg, of course, was no different. He was smitten by its beauty, in awe of its complexity, and taken aback by its uniqueness. Perhaps a bit too taken aback. Tom had been so fixated on the egg that he failed to notice the enormous shadow traveling over the snow behind him, the shadow that could only belong to one of those violent, dangerous lovers of 1940s big band music, one of these granite-skinned monstrosities who ruled the skies of Imagine Mountain, whose awful creatures, famous for having talons and beaks that can penetrate the strongest rock and steel, who were created long ago by a warlock with no name for an army that no longer exists. One among those heartless beasts lacked in both compassion and respect for any of their own kind, beasts whose only desires are to maim, feed, and fly, these horrible brutes whose 2 wings combined are an amazing 10 feet of aerodynamic wonder, and who strike fear into the hearts of any found under their shadow. Surely by now you've guessed I can only be talking about a stone pterodactyl. Now, as everyone knows, while stone pterodactyls regard any form of meat as edible, they are extremely partial to baby ice snakes. From the eggshell to the snake tail, there is nothing about this that they do not consider to be fine cuisine, that they do not enjoy. Oh, why hello, Vil. I did not realize that you came in here. Oh yes, it is great to see you, brother. I just finished reading a terrible book. They told me it was going to be a cautionary tale, and yet the good guys still won. Oh, well, I can see where that could be a problem. Well, you could finish reading this book with me, although I can't promise that there's going to be any good news for bad guys here. Oh, that's okay, brother. At this point, I am used to disappointment. Carrying on. Yes, I'll continue. So it is no wonder, then, that while Tom was distracted by the beauty of the egg, the stone pterodactyl swooped down upon the diamond-like glacier, grabbed the egg in its talons, and carried it high into the sky above Tom. Brother, are you sure you could speak in any higher tone of voice? Well, I'm sure I could if I had to. I'm just very excited to be away from those other people who are so mean to me. Okay. Now Tom, who was quite the carnivore himself, was also rather partial to ice snakes, though he wasn't partial to them in the they make a fine dinner, fine dinner, fine dinner kind of way. Rather, he was partial to them in a way that implied he enjoyed the company very much. Many an ice snake played with Tom or took walks with him, and he found that their whooshes made him feel light-hearted in the same way that a child's laughter did. Therefore Tom could not simply let the stone pterodactyl fly off with the creature. He had to save the baby ice snake, but how? It should be noted here that the skin of a snow apple is impossible to penetrate without the use of a jackhammer, drill, snow saber claw, or something along those lines. Unless, of course, one has a jaw like a metal vice grip, and teeth as hard and strong as iron like Tom. Yes, its nearly impenetrable skin explains why most people never get to enjoy sweet and sour inside of snow apples, and why several armies throughout history have used them as projectiles against opposing forces. Crunch! Which is also why Tom thought the best course of action to take in saving what was sure to be his future playmate was to hurl the apple as hard as he could at the feet of the stone pterodactyl. The talons, while protecting the egg from any harm, would themselves be totally exposed to the full wrath of the Herculean fruit flying towards them. Upon impact, the talons would shatter, causing the egg to fall from the sky, and then go splat. Take that, Mr. Tom. Oh, Vil, that's not how it goes. Make the egg fall from the sky, gently into Tom's expectant hands.
Well, of course that's how he thinks it will go.
Well, let's just see how it does go then. Allowing Tom to place the egg back where it belongs as the pterodactyl flies away, humiliated in defeat, giving Tom the opportunity to resume his consumption of snow apples in peace. This was a good plan, a solid plan, especially considering that the pterodactyl was only 100 feet or so in the air, and therefore not yet high enough above Tom for the fall to be of any real peril to the egg. The eggshells are, after all, very strong, but if you are the right age, I'm sure you already knew that. So Tom cocked his arm back with the apple in hand, shot the fruit into the sky, and with it he
shattered the pterodactyl's talons, just as planned. What didn't go according to plan, however, was everything else. Ha-ha! I knew it wouldn't go according to plan.
Yes, well, there still might be a plan here.
Pushed by a gust of wind, the egg fell into the lake instead of Tom's hands. Far from being defeated, but definitely humiliated, the enraged pterodactyl began diving rapidly towards Tom, its beak aimed for his chest. Ha-ha, we're going to get him in the chest with my stone beak.
And suddenly, Tom realized that his plan wasn't as good as he thought it was.
Of course it wasn't. It was a terrible plan.
Well, I don't know if it was terrible. Now, of course, Tom wanted to go after the baby ice snake, but he knew it would be safe in the water, considering the egg's wondrous ability to float. So he decided instead to take care of the pterodactyl and retrieve the egg afterwards. While Tom waited for the pterodactyl to reach him, it was still about 5 seconds away. He decided to think of 6 impossible things, a chore he normally does before breakfast, but had forgotten to do this morning.
The first impossible thing: pink pancakes that taste like sugar plums. Electric brooms that sweep to the rhythm of music on your radio. Edible holographic donuts. All the taste but none of the calories. Oh, this sounds delicious. Encouragement shotguns. Build people up instead of blowing them away. Well, I guess that's one way to use a shotgun. Comfortable school desks. Well, that would be incredible. I wish I had comfortable school desks.
Yes, well, our school desks weren't very comfortable growing up. That would be an incredible, but as he pointed out here, Bill, an impossible invention.
Oh, yes, of course. All the best inventions are impossible. And, of course, garlic-scented mustache wax.
Well, I'm not quite sure. Well, that would be impossible. I would think adding garlic scent to mustache wax would be fairly easy, though I'm not sure anyone besides Tom would enjoy it.
By the time Tom finished thinking of the 6th impossible thing on his list, the pterodactyl was within inches of his chest. Oh, it's going to get him with his stone beak.
Well, I don't think so, Bill. This gave Tom just enough time to jump out of the way, but giving the pterodactyl no time whatsoever before crashing, beak first, into the ground.
Oh, I really thought it was going to get him.
Phil, you always think it's going to get the hero, but one of these days you will learn. Crash! The pterodactyl shattered into several dozen pieces. Clearly, Tom knew that as strong and dangerous as a stone pterodactyl may be, they are not wise enough to realize that their heavy bodies have no chance of surviving a direct impact with the ground when descending at a great speed from 100 feet in the air. With the threat gone, Tom ran toward the lake.
He was already waist deep in the water before he realized that the egg was nowhere to be seen. Tom was immediately frightened. He dived under the water and looked as best he could for any sign of the egg. He swam the entirety of the lake several times and then walked its edges. Ha-ha! The egg is gone. He'll never find it.
Oh, I think he will find it. He searched for half an hour at least and still no sign of the egg. Finally, he took a moment to pause near the silver tree which had brought him to the lake in the first place, and at that moment his mind began to race.
Did that shatter both the talons and the egg with the apple? Was that what they hit the lake? Was just a piece of eggshell? Maybe the egg cracked if they hit in the water and sank? Or maybe another animal got it? Maybe
you should tell me what you're doing here, Arnold. I thought you were reading another book.
Oh yes, we finished that book. It was a really good one. I liked it. I hope Bill doesn't stay mad for too long, though. Guy pulled a really funny trick on him.
I don't think it was funny at all. You guys just like to pick on me. It's not my fault I relate more with the villains than the heroes in these stories.
Well, I think it's endearing, Bill. Don't give up on your stories.
Oh, thanks, Jason. At least someone here appreciates what I do.
Oh, don't be silly, Bill. We all appreciate it. But back to the story. But before Tom could finish his next thought, he heard a gentle whoosh coming from behind him. Slowly, Tom turned around, and to his great relief, he saw 2 black eyes staring at him from the snow. You're alive!
Oh, and I thought the ice snake had cracked its shell and had sunk in the lake.
Worry is a burden that man was never intended to carry. So heavy is its weight that when placed upon the heart it can sink a man's soul. So you can imagine how Tom must have felt when the worry he had suffered through only momentarily instantly dissolved at the sight of the baby ice snake. He was full of elation.
The baby ice snake, who was now a marvelous white, had survived, and not only survived but had hatched, and was now lying unharmed near the silver tree.
Oh, there's that villainous guy. He's the real villain in these stories, pulling jokes on people.
Oh, Vil, I said I was sorry.
Yes, well, you can just keep reading. I think I've got nothing else to do with you today.
Oh, Vil, we'll find a good story for you, I promise. You guys are interrupting my book reading. We have to continue this, you know. Tom's happiness in that moment was far from inexpressible, and it was therefore expressible. Thus he decided to express it a bit with a haiku. No longer afraid. The danger had passed away, and you are still here. He was on the verge of creating a sonnet to further commemorate the moment when suddenly he found himself interrupted by yet another whoosh coming from behind him.
Now, in addition to the fact that the sound was coming from the opposite direction, this whoosh was much deeper and stronger than the baby's, and therefore could not belong to him. No, this whoosh was most definitely belonging to an adult ice snake, which led Tom to believe that it might have come from the baby's father, or so he hoped. So it was with a bit of apprehension he turned around. With great excitement, found himself greeted by 2 additional sets of black eyes.
2 sets of eyes that soon became 3, as the baby slid over to its family and met its parents for the first time. Seconds later, Tom watched as the snake slithered off to their home, a smile of delight on his face, a pang of joy in his heart. Well, one of these days he's going to feel a real pang.
Oh, Vil, I don't think so. He was pleased with the morning thus far. Now that his adventure with the ice snake was over, he began to wonder what he should do next.
Should I build a snowman? I can build a snow house for it as well, plus a snowmobile and a driveway to park it on. Perhaps I should wrestle a bear or porcupine. I could always just write a sonnet or 2.
Now here is a guy who's really connected with his artistic side.
His question was finally answered with a deafening growl coming from his already empty stomach, reminding him that he hadn't finished the 24 snow apples he had intended to eat earlier, and he was still very hungry.
Even more so now after fighting a stone pterodactyl, Tom was also delighted to realize that it was actually quite close to lunch, and brunch seemed to Tom like a glorious idea. So after enjoying a few additional snow apples, Tom set off for his cabin to make himself something to eat. And that is, at long last, the end of our story. It ended as it began. A man, a wondrous, incredible, heroic man, setting off to find food. Well, sorry I came in so late on this one, guys. But I hope everyone has a great day. And we would love for people to send us videos of their kids reading this book in their epic voices. Check out our website to learn more. Don't forget to subscribe.